I love being able to connect with the people who do this work, or whether it's an art teacher who has taught in a high school for 40 years, or if it's a glass blower who is training as an apprentice under another prolific glass blower. That's the kind of work that's really exciting because I get to be out and visit with communities, with their leaders, with their artists, and find ways for us to continue to support the work that they do, but also to continue to tell that story through our platform.
Hey everyone, Andrew Allen here. Today on Bottled Up, we're welcoming David Lewis, Executive Director of the Mississippi Arts Commission. David's a Jackson native who took his architecture chops from Mississippi State, sharpened them with urban planning at JSU, and turned that blend into real, on-the-ground impact. Think the Welcome to Jackson mural, revitalizing cultural spaces across the city and reimagining the state's only planetarium into an immersive experience. In this episode, you'll hear how public art can flip a city's narrative, what it really takes to fund the arts in Mississippi, and why our coast is one of the country's most vibrant, creative destinations. David also shares the story behind Mississippi State's architecture presence at the Venice Biennale, what it means to be named a fellow by MSU's School of Architecture, and how you, whether you're an artist, an organizer, or a fan, can plug in, apply for grants, and show up for the Governor's Art Awards and the National Folk Festival coming to Jackson. This is a great conversation about design with intention, community with heart, and Mississippi showing the world what it can do. So grab a cold Pepsi, settle in, and let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Bottled Up. Today, my very special guest is Mr. David Lewis, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Art Commission. David, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, David, I'm so glad you decided you wanted to come on and kind of discuss the arts in our state. And I kind of wanted to begin this conversation with a little bit of your history. So, where did you grow up, David?
Yeah, grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, in Belhaven, born and raised. I say that specifically about Belhaven because I think it comes into play later here in my life and the way that I the career path that I chose, because Belhaven, such a great neighborhood with, a little bit of everything at your fingertips. You've got a grocery store, you've got a university, you can go to school, you can go to church there. Everything you need kind of in a community is in that neighborhood. And I think that comes into play later in my life when I start to get into urban planning. But loved growing up in the city of Jackson and really had, the arts as part of my life growing up.
So, David, how old were you when you started to recognize that, the arts are something that means a lot to you? It's something that is kind of your passion that has driven your career through now. And what year was that? What was the kind of aha moment for you?
Yeah, I think my earliest memories of really being drawn to the arts in general are, I think everybody has like a teacher, right, that makes this really powerful impression. And we had this art teacher, Miss Laird, who was just extraordinary. And I could not get enough of art class. And I think I just kind of played around with the different art forms. And then my mom, of course, tells this story of being frustrated when we were on a family trip because they had given me a camera and wanted me to take pictures of like our family. But in the end, I kept taking pictures of buildings on this trip. I think we were in Miami, and she was like, you just kept taking photos of buildings and not of people. And so I think that's when I started to really be curious and really inspired by architecture specifically.
Okay, so you graduated. What high school did you end up attending?
Went to Jackson Academy, go Raiders.
All right, JA. Okay, so went to JA, graduated, and then went to Mississippi State for architecture, correct?
That's right. Yes, I looked at a couple other schools. Tulane was really interesting to me, but when it came to Mississippi State, that was Starkville's like a second home to me, and they gave me a really great scholarship. But I had a lot of friends that went there, and the architecture program is really extraordinary there. So I was really drawn to MSU.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that my class went. It was kind of split evenly amongst Ole Miss and Mississippi State, and there were a few Southern kids in there spread out. But I was drawn. All my closest friends went to State, and my daddy knows a State grad, so that's where I ended up as well. So Mississippi State architecture. So you're at State. What were your years in college while you were there?
Yeah, so I went up there in 2010, and the School of Architecture is a 5-year program. So I didn't graduate until 2015 because your fifth year is actually back in Jackson. There's a school, a building downtown Jackson where the fifth year has a studio, and it's a really great experience. But I was there in Starkville from 2010 to 2014, which are actually really great football years too.
Yeah, you lucked out, man. You really lucked out. I was there from, let's see, '05 to '09.
Yeah.
And so I got to see when Dan Mullen came in, and I remember his first season. You know how we used to always go as students, you would go and everybody would stand in line and get your student season tickets.
Yes, very, very vividly. I remember that.
Yes, the first year that Mullen was there, he had a giant thing of Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and he was handing them all out to every student that got their tickets. He's personally handing out sandwiches to all of them and introducing himself. So I got to see pre-Mullen, and then I got
Yeah.
to see post-Mullen. So between him and what was the name of the athletic director we had at that time? Do you remember?
Scott Strickland.
Yes. So between him and Strickland, they completely changed that campus
Yeah.
and the way that that campus looked. So you got to basically be in there during the heyday.
Oh, I was. And, it was also like when they would do a lot of, they tried this event called Tents for Tickets. I don't know if you ever heard about this event.
I did
And it was
not.
like this all night extravaganza basically to like get tickets for student tickets. And so, because the football games were so great, like, and so sought after that, like, students really wanted the tickets. And so, it didn't end up going as well, but I think the heart was there. But it was pretty wild. Like people would camp out all night, and then if you stayed up and got like all these different like check-ins at different games, they had like a volleyball game and a basketball game that you would go to. And if you checked in and all these things and then did all these things throughout the night, then you got sort of into an earlier line for tickets. But when the day came for everybody to pick up their tickets and get them, the line wound like halfway across campus. It was insane.
Yeah, that's so incredible, man. And if you tell somebody a little bit older than me about that during the Croom era, I mean, the stands were empty. I remember
Yeah.
my freshman or sophomore year, we had our homecoming game was against Maine, and they beat us that year, and
Mm.
it was just like, God, we need a change. My freshman dorm, there was a guy who made a calendar outside in the hallway in the dorm. It was like days until basketball season, and like
Yeah.
he would tear off a day every day because that was when we were really still good at basketball, but our football program was not what it is today. So,
No, but we did have a good weekend.
yes, we did. I'm sure you watched that game.
Yeah, it was a great game.
I woke my entire home up in the last 30 seconds of that game. So,
Yeah.
but we're 2-0 right now for
There we
anybody who's a
go.
state fan. So, we got some really lucky calls and some broken coverages that allowed us to win. But you know what?
Right.
That's a win you can build a season off of right
It
there.
is. It is.
So, well, David, okay, so you graduate from Mississippi State in the College of Architecture, which is, by the way, I had a buddy of mine. My best friend had some classes in there. He was a MCLD, Management Construction and Land Development major. They changed that major while he was in it, but he had a bunch of classes in there too. But the culture in the architecture school was you basically lived in that building. Like they'd have like cots and stuff where people were like sleeping in there. So talk a little bit about how strenuous it is to be an architecture major at Mississippi State.
It's definitely a very involved degree. And while I did not have a cot, we did make an effort to try to get to as many football games as possible. But we did pull a lot of all-nighters and we did put a lot of good work in. A lot of it is because, I think for an architect, even for an engineer, we're building buildings that have to like stand and have to like, so it's kind of like fitting all that very important education into those 5 years, that they have a really high bar that they set. And I think one of the best things that I learned in school, outside of the very technicalities of sort of the profession of architecture, is creative problem solving and the way to really defend and support the work that you have. So the lessons that I learned presenting designs to professors for critiques and them for poking holes in everything prepared me for doing stuff that's often very political, convincing a an elected member that the idea that we have for our agency or the project that I was doing maybe for the city of Jackson should be funded, and I was able to think through all of the ideas that would solve for the things that I knew that they cared about or that the public cares about. And so that's one of the best things that I got out of that program and that time was the ability to think about the community perspective and bring their voice into the work that I do, but also to defend that really good work.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that because people there especially in nowadays, with everything being so polarizing politically, for you to kind of touch on that college is more about working through problems in life and how to utilize people's skills on your team and to build a story to get the project funded. Now, it's one
Yeah.
thing to design something, it's another thing to get it built.
Right.
So that's really interesting to think about when it comes to your current role,
Yeah.
where you have to, like, you do have to talk to elected officials who have an agenda for their constituents who have elected them. And so, after you graduated, what was your first job getting out of school?
Yeah, great question. So I thought, I'll say before I got into architecture school and even in the first part of architecture school, I thought I wanted to go to New York and build skyscrapers. That was like the dream, right? And the more that I traveled with the School of Architecture, because we did some really great field trips, the more I kept seeing places and spaces that I felt like I wanted to bring back home and bring back to Mississippi, bring back to Jackson, because it felt like back home was this really wonderful canvas to paint on and to bring really exciting things to Mississippi, public spaces, different types of, facilities or public art, public spaces. That was really interesting to me. And so by the time I graduated, I was pretty set on. I thought I was going to go to Nashville. I had a job offer in Nashville, and an architecture firm came to me and said, "What have you thought about staying?" And I didn't expect this firm to kind of approach me because I thought, they do really excellent work, and I was like, this is a firm that I might come back and work for one day. And so the opportunity to work with them was really wonderful, and it gave me the chance to really dive more quickly into the work that I wanted to do, which was in Jackson. And so I became very plugged in with a group called Team Jackson that was really about promoting and amplifying really stories of growth and economic development in Jackson and what was happening. And so I pretty quickly got fully immersed in that work when I was working for an architecture firm over in Fondren.
That's interesting. So, David, you've always kind of had an eye for community involvement. And for the listener who does not know, David is family. So David and I are related through marriage. He is married to my first cousin, Mary Lee. So you've always kind of had this community lens on everything that you do about trying to enrich the community around you. And you've always had a love for your hometown, which I think is, I'm not going to say it's necessarily like a really Southern thing. I do think that people in the South, they normally tend to stay closer to home for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't really know, or they don't, right? They either do or
Right.
they don't. And I think that myself included, we kind of like to spend time in areas we're comfortable, and then we want to enrich those areas around us. So you've always kind of had a lens on of where you're like, how can I take my skill set that I've learned, in college and bring it back to my hometown and try to make my hometown better? So, what was the first big thing that you did professionally graduating after school that was kind of like, okay, this is my gig, this is my calling?
Well, I really appreciate those comments, Andrew. That's really kind. Yeah, it is very much about the work that I do, and so I'll say so. I worked at this architecture firm for about a year, and then went pretty quickly into grad school at JSU to study urban planning, specifically in the city of Jackson, to really harness that set and sort of like continue to sharpen those tools around community growth and sort of community engagement and development. And so it was when I was in grad school, actually dating Mary Lee. Shout out to Mary Lee.
Yeah, shout out, Mary Lee.
Yeah. And and then also working for I pivoted out of working for architecture firms to working for a local arts council, the Greater Jackson Arts Council. And I had the opportunity there to really dream big with public art. They sort of like let me loose. And we started work on a large scale public art project, which is the Welcome to Jackson mural, which some listeners may be familiar with, some may not. It's a large scale mural that sort of welcomes you to downtown Jackson. It was, and the pitch was for this to happen as the two Mississippi museums opened for the state's bicentennial. The goal was that when people drove over the Pearl Street Bridge and came into downtown Jackson, maybe for the first time in ever or the first time in a couple of decades, we wanted them to drive over that bridge and say, wow, Jackson looks a lot different than I remember it. Instead of, oh, Jackson looks a lot different than I remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. And and you're fighting uphill a lot with a mindset, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it was about changing that. And I had seen in Nashville, specifically with the We Heart Nashville and a bunch of other murals in Nashville, how public art can change that narrative and really inspire civic pride. And so that mural project actually finished right after we got married. In fact, some of our wedding photos are out in front of that mural, which is really fun to kind of see that come to life. And then afterwards, when it was done, Clarion Ledger changed the orientation of its paper from sort of top down to side to side. So when you folded it out, the whole building sort of spanned both the top and bottom of the fold. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this is where we can make change. If we can create spaces, create opportunities, and create moments for our city and for our state and give that story to the world, they're going to want to tell it. And so that was really what drove me kind of into the career path that I'm in now.
So, okay, I do remember those photos of your wedding photos, and I now am remembering that you were involved in that mural. So that kind of sparked your ability inside of you to realize that I can do something that can make change in my town. And for those of you who are not from Mississippi and do not know Jackson very well, Jackson, it seemed for a while there, David, that Jackson was just kind of stagnant. It
Yeah.
wasn't, no one was really trying anything new. No one was trying to do what you're talking about. So since you started on this, what all has been done or what have you been involved in with the city that has kind of started to change the landscape and the mindset of our capital city in Mississippi?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're right. I think things got to a place where, I think in general, Mississippi has often suffered from a lot of young talent being attracted to other places, right? And it's hard to keep young talent here.
100%.
And so it's also it makes it hard for those of us who stay to find each other, right? And to really energize each other and to build off of each other. I often liken working with a lot of the contemporaries that I did at that time to the way that the auto industry was in Detroit, where, all these people were working on these innovations all next to each other in the same town, which sort of accelerated all of that growth and the development of a lot of the automobile industry at that time. And so I think that in Jackson, when I sort of decided to plant there, we decided, hey, we're going to stick here. There were a lot of remarkable people asking good questions and starting to figure out what change we could make. And so I think we're starting to really feel the fruits of that labor as a community. But it led me, once I was at the Greater Jackson Arts Council for a while, my next step once I graduated was I started working for the city of Jackson as the deputy director of cultural services. So I oversaw planetarium, the arts center, Thalia Memorial Hall. I ran for about 4.5 years, up until about 3 or 4 years ago, and then the municipal art gallery and the art center Mississippi. And so that sort of became, and now that I had this urban planning and urban design degree, that sort of became my little mini city where I could take all these spaces and renovate, rethink them, reevaluate them, raise money to do lighting projects, mural projects, which then grew into bigger things. And so what that grew into was the opportunity to renovate fully the planetarium, which is the state's only planetarium, had never been fully renovated in its 40 plus year history. and we saw an opportunity. There was some hail damage that caused some roof leaking that led to us having to close it, and really gave us the opportunity to say, now that it's closed, this is the chance we have to fully renovate this. And so the director of the planetarium there, Mike Williams, and I worked very closely to cast a vision right before the pandemic for what the planetarium could become, really leaning heavily into what was not being talked about at the time, but is very much so now, which is sort of immersive experiences.
Right.
And the idea that we had was to let people hop on the elevator up to the third floor and then hop off onto a sort of immersive space station with screens that look like you're out in space, and really take people to space very fully, but talk about space and science history and the ways that that sort of finds its way throughout our lives, but also the role that Mississippi plays, because the Stennis Space Center down there on the coast is a huge part of our nation's space program. And I think there's a famous quote about all roads to space stop in Mississippi.
Yeah.
So, an opportunity to tell that story at a pretty high level and a pretty high tech level as well kind of became a big focus for us. Alongside, we raised several $1 million to renovate some interior pieces of Thalia Mara Hall at a key moment.
Well, David, throughout all of these projects and all of these properties that were in charge of during that 4.5 year period, what, and I guess this question could go back to your studies at Mississippi State, was there a specific type of architecture or a specific design of architecture that you gravitated towards the most? Is there a style that you tend to, like the best out of all other styles?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, so I don't think so. I think what inspires me is something that feels intentional and well thought out, that's designed for the experience. So it goes beyond sort of a warehouse is very utilitarian, right? But if you take that warehouse and somebody decides to put, a new front on it that is designed towards the way they want to engage a customer. So like a great example is the Museum of Art in downtown Jackson. It was actually just a warehouse for a long time. And then they came in and really intentionally rethought that renovation so that the experience brought new levels of natural light into the space. They redid the whole atrium so that it was all about sort of the front porch. It's got this large porchway and brought these sort of southern elements into it. So I would actually say that now that I'm kind of thinking out loud, I think I gravitate a lot to really innovative renovation and revitalization work. I think that that's so great, an idea of taking something that was once used and bringing new life into it.
So you're more about the design elements have to be intentional in your mind.
Yes, absolutely. I think that goes beyond sort of aesthetics. Although I do love a good aesthetic. I love color, when color's used really boldly. But I don't think that it doesn't always have to be that way. So I think it comes down to me like, why did someone decide to design this space this way? So for example, when you go into the planetarium, there's a new atrium that connects these two buildings. And at the front of the building, it's like 3+ stories tall. At the back of the building, it's not as high. But when you're coming off the street and you're in downtown Jackson, you want it to have this sort of tall urban feel. And when you come in, there's this staircase that starts at the back of the lobby and sort of stitches its way up and across the lobby and between the two buildings. So the idea is that when you walk in, you immediately look up, much like you would if you were looking up to the sky or looking up to space. So the idea of drawing someone's eye up is very much in theme with the idea of the planetarium.
I like that a lot. I appreciate when someone is putting almost like reality Easter eggs
Yeah.
inside of design when it comes to something, not just making something look pretty, but making something look pretty with intention is very interesting. So David, you do those projects for 4.5 years. You work for the council for 4.5 years, correct?
He worked for the city for 4.5 years.
Okay. And then when did you start as executive director of the Mississippi Art Commission?
Just under 3 years ago. It was in January of 2023. So a little over 2.5 years ago, started working for the Arts Commission at the state level.
Okay, so David, explain to the listener what the Art Commission responsibilities are and what their main duties are in the state?
Absolutely. So we are a state agency. We receive state funding and federal funding to provide grants and programs for artists all across the state. And it's really excellent work. I mean, Mississippi is notorious for the high caliber of creative that we have, both that we put out and the ones that we have here in Mississippi. So we get the opportunity to support them through individual grants, through operating organizational grants, through building fund grants. We get to do a lot of really exciting work and really empower the people across Mississippi in every community that we can get to do really exciting work in the arts and to really inspire their communities and provide a greater quality of life.
So you're writing grants for the entire state. How much of the majority of those grants are taking place on the coast and in Jackson?
Yeah, so let me clarify a little bit. So we're not writing the grant; they're writing the grants to us. We provide the funds for the grant. So
Got
they
it. Okay, so you're reviewing the grants.
correct. And we have a ton of really great grants all across the coast. So the Walter Anderson Museum, the Orr O'Keefe Museum, the Lynn Meadows Children's Center, the 100 Men Hall over in Bay St. Louis, and then visual artists from all over. So potters, clay makers, visual artists, sculptors, you name it. They're all across Mississippi, but really also very heavily centered around the coast. Cultural scene is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's kind of like New Orleans East.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
so it's and the crazy part about the coast is that every small town, I mean, stretching from the Bay to Pascagoula, all those towns are different.
Yes.
So Ocean Springs has its own flair, and the Whama's over there, and then you have Biloxi and Gulfport, and then you get into the Long Beach, Pass Christian area, and then it's just there's a lot. Like you said, it's a highly enriched area when it comes to the art scene, and I'm actually seeing a lot more. Do you guys do anything with theater or anything like that?
Yeah, so the Center Stage Biloxi is one of our Biloxi Little Theater. They're all grantees of ours, usually getting operating support or building fund support. So you might have seen Center Stage's new lobby that they did a couple years ago that was supported from help from the legislature through our building fund for the arts program, the Traveler at Ocean Springs. So we can do a little bit of everything across all of the sort of industries of the arts, whether it's theater, literature, visual arts, sculpture, community arts, you name it, we're there. Music, especially, you name it, we usually are involved in some way. And it's really remarkable what's being done.
Okay, how much federal funding do you depend upon when it comes to these grants and it comes to because I know that you're kind of tied to whatever legislators are in power, you're kind of tied to pitching those legislators for the levels of funding that you get. So, how much is federal and how much is state funded?
Yeah, great question. So we receive a significant portion of our funding from the state is very wonderful and generous and supportive. We have a lot of great supportive legislators there on the coast. Senator England comes to mind. But we also receive a little over $1 million from the National Endowment for the Arts. Most of that funding goes directly to arts organizations for operating support. This allows them to keep their lights on, to pay for staff, to pay for rent for a building, to pay for copy paper, the stuff that they need to operate. Those are dollars that are really hard to come by. We've received this grant from the NEA since our existence, which is several decades. And so a lot of these organizations have gotten that funding since then. And so it's very important to us. The National Endowment for the Arts is who we get it through, and they've continued to allow us to be able to do that so that Mississippians can continue to do great work.
Have you had any really tough conversations over the last year and a half?
I think with federal funding broadly right now, I think it gets everybody to sort of reevaluate the way that they talk about their funding to ensure that decision makers understand the true impact. But it just keeps us accountable to ensuring that we are telling that story because we do believe in the work that we do. We do believe that every dollar that we receive from the federal government or from the legislature goes right back into the hands of Mississippians through arts organizations or directly to artists. And so that's so important for something for us to do in our and to stimulate our economy because especially in Mississippi, you can't tell a tourism story without talking about the arts, and you can't talk about the arts without talking about tourism. And so it's such a huge piece to sort of our state's economic footprint are our arts and culture.
You must be super busy when it comes to lunches and meetings, and your networking has got to be probably next level up there in Jackson, I would imagine.
It is, but what I love about this work is that it gets me all across our state. I was in Starkville last week. I was in Oxford the week before and in Newton, Mississippi. And I love being able to connect with the people who do this work, or whether it's an art teacher who has taught in a high school for 40 years, or if it's a glass blower who is training as an apprentice under another very, prolific glassblower. This, community keeps, I think, a lot of our state very exciting and very sort of keeps the heartbeat of our state at its center. And so that's the kind of work that's really exciting because I get to be out and visit with communities, with their leaders, with their artists, and find ways for us to continue to support the work that they do, but also to continue to tell that story through our platform.
David, I know that you've gone on some pretty incredible architecture trips and visited some really beautiful architecture throughout the world. What one of those kind of stands out in your head as like the one that you've loved the most in the last, the last decade that you've been doing stuff for the state when it comes to the arts?
That's a really great question. I think that I'll answer it this way, which is sort of I don't have a favorite. I think I love to be inspired by the things that different cities have to offer. I can always find something that's going to inspire me. I love to get out. But I also think what's so important is that Mississippi has its own version of whatever that thing is. Let's say
Yes.
it's a coffee shop or let's say it's a mural. It's not going to be that we're going to copy and paste that mural from somewhere else. We've got to figure out that, okay, the mural in it of itself as a concept is the thing that works. How do we tell our story in a really unique and really dynamic way? And oftentimes, I would argue, better way, more authentic way here in Mississippi to make it our own and to make it unique. And so that's what gets me excited is to say, okay, there's this thing that works really well in this place. How do we bring that thing and its idea here, but make it our own and make it even better?
I know you went overseas
Yes,
and it was in Italy, correct?
that's right. We were in Venice with Dr. Keenum, the president of the university, because for the Venice Biennale, which is an architectural exhibition every other year in Venice, at the America Pavilion, Mississippi State's two design research centers for architecture, the Gulf Coast Community Design Center down there on the coast, as well as the Fred Carl Jr. Small Town Center in Starkville, were both featured and on display at the America Pavilion in Venice, which is the first time in the university's history, the one of few times that Mississippi has been showcased, but the Mississippi presence was very much felt.
That's crazy to think about that we have that level of exposure over there in Venice.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, the exhibit by the Small Town Center, for example, was all about the porches of Neshoba County. In fact, the whole America Pavilion exhibit was about the front porch, which, of course, in Mississippi, I beg to say that we have the most to say about it. But
Yeah, for
it's
real.
really an American thing, right? It's very American the way that the front porch is about community and engaging people. But it was wild to see the Neshoba County Fair on display in Venice, Italy.
Being in Europe and being American is one thing, but being in Europe and being American and being from the South is completely different.
Yeah.
I've spent a little bit of time over there, whether it be like Spain or England or Italy, and talking with local people in Europe, and they ask, oh, you're American. It's like, oh, your accent. It's like, you must be from Texas or something like that. I think they kind of find us and look at us as a novelty, and they're very interested in the South in general, just because we're kind of like we're a unique flavor of American,
Yeah.
and we're always really welcoming. Mississippians, especially, have never met a stranger. We're really easy to talk to, no matter where you're from. So, talk about your experience a little bit more in Italy and how you were found over there and how you enjoyed the locals.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, it was really wonderful. We had a great time. Like you said, you don't meet a stranger. We connected with people very quickly. But I think what also really struck me was as I saw, I think it really came to the forefront as I saw the way that this very southern, inherently southern exhibition about the front porch, it's something that's very tactile. They made physical models in a space that is typically printed material or screen based material. A lot of the other countries. So Mary Lee and I actually went and visited every single country's pavilion and the entire international exhibition itself. So we saw like a lot of architectural installations. She was such a trooper, but I think she enjoyed it as well. But what was so striking to me was sort of the accessibility of the porch exhibition. And I think that that's what it is that there's something about Southern culture that is very accessible. I think there are a lot of struggles that we have that speak to universal struggles that anybody can relate to. But I think there's a warmth in Southern culture that people either wish that they had in their own sort of country or their own world, but they also feel very attached to immediately. And so I think that that's where I really felt it too, was the way that I saw people walk and engage in that exhibition space and the way that they sort of sat in transition to or in opposition to some of the other installations.
Yeah, that's a very good viewpoint when it comes to thinking about all the other exhibitions compared to ours and how, front porches for us, like things that we used to talk about in the South is like, hey, well, why were you there for 3 hours? It's like, oh, we just had a visit.
Right.
Like we just visited a little bit. It's like, well, that's a 3 hour conversation, So
Right.
it's interesting the cultural dynamics between Europe and here, especially, but seeing how they are attached to something that we kind of take for granted is very interesting to me. Well, David, I want to talk a little bit about you're going to be honored here in the next couple of weeks at Mississippi State, and I know that you're going to become a fellow for the School of Architecture up there. Explain to the audience who does not know how high of an honor this is, and you're going to have to toot your own horn a little bit. But explain to the listener what that means for you and how one receives this honor.
Yeah, so I don't really know how they're selected other than I think that maybe you get nominated, but what I have learned so far is that the university selects one fellow to represent each college at the university each year. In fact, your own father was selected right at the College of Business in 2011, which is remarkable.
He was. And David, a little bit of inside baseball on that. I was super frustrated that I was in McCool Hall for so long with no stroke. I had no inside guy, and if he would have just gotten that about 3 or 4 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have had to take my finals, and I
Right.
probably could have just gotten away with it, whatever I wanted. But yeah, so I have his plaque. I'm looking at it right now. I have his plaque in my office.
It's amazing.
It's a very large honor for an alumni or even anyone who is involved with Mississippi State to receive a fellowship. So you're going to be receiving this award on the 26th. Is that correct?
On the 20th, at
20th.
the Northern Illinois game, I get to walk out on the field.
Good for you. You got your outfit picked out.
Oh yes, I actually got it. It's a very maroon suit that is
Good.
I'm very excited about.
We were gonna try to make it up for that game to watch you, but we weren't. Something happened. We're not able to do it. I think it's probably kids' birthday parties or something like that.
Yeah, I
But
get that.
but yeah, no, that's a high honor, man, and I
Thank
think
you.
it couldn't go to a better guy,
Thank you.
David. You've always been a very personable, solid individual. I'm very glad that you married my cousin, and that anytime that we have family get-togethers, I get to have conversations and spend some time with you.
Man, I'm glad too. I'm the lucky one over here. And thank you so much for pointing that out. And I'm really honored that Mississippi State has selected me. I hope to represent them well and to impart whatever knowledge I can to these students. It should be a good weekend.
Yes, it's going to be great. And well, once again, just you're always a breath of fresh air, man, and you spend a lot of time focusing on a lot of people other than yourself when it comes to either the community or everyone around you. And I just commend you for what you've done since you've graduated from school
Thank you.
and your career path. And I know that it's just going to keep growing and growing, and you're going to keep enriching everyone around you. And I appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. And I hope that everything goes off without a hitch in a few weeks in Starkville.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited about this.
Absolutely, David. Well, is there anything coming up in Jackson or anything that you're involved in that you might want to kind of plug and see if anybody would be interested in?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll be announcing our Governor's Arts Awards recipients here soon. That ceremony takes place in Jackson in February. It's a really great event to honor the very best that Mississippi has. And then also the National Folk Festival will be happening in November 7th, 8th, and 9th in downtown Jackson. This is like a massive deal. The National Festival rotates every 3 years to different cities, and this is the first time it'll be in the Deep South ever of its 90-year history. Couldn't think of a better place than Mississippi to do so, especially as we come across the nation's semi-quincentennial, America 250. What better
Oh yeah.
place to feature America's music than bringing it back home to where it began in Mississippi. So it's a free festival, and we're inviting everybody from all across the state and all over the nation to come and enjoy it. It'll be a really remarkable event.
Well, David, thank you for your time. And so are you accepting donations from private citizens, or is it all just funded? How does that work? Because if I was
Yeah.
to if we were able to get the word out to anyone who's listening who wants to help, champion the arts or to help donate or fundraise for any of the initiatives that you have coming up, how would that person do that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So we do fundraise specifically for the Governor's Arts Awards. That's an event that we put on. That's a really high caliber event that allows for sponsorships. People can come to the show and whatnot. But we also, the best thing you can do is if you love the arts and you think that we're doing a great job and want to keep supporting that, let your local officials know that you appreciate the work that we do. That's about the best that we can get from anybody is those personal accounts from their constituents as to why this work is important for their community.
So, David, where would people go to maybe possibly get a grant for themselves or to find out more about how to participate in the arts in Mississippi?
People can check us out on Instagram as well and Facebook, as well as our website, arts.ms.gov. That's where you can find all the information from our calendar to how to apply for grants if you're an artist or an organization. And don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions about how we can help you.
Okay. Well, David, I appreciate your time once again. Thank you for spending about 45 minutes with us. And I look forward to seeing you soon, man.
All right. Thanks so much, Andrew.
That's going to do it for this episode of Bottled Up. A huge thank you to our guest, David Lewis, Executive Director of the Mississippi Arts Commission, for sharing his journey. From architecture and urban planning to championing public art, revitalizing spaces like the planetarium, and supporting artists and creatives across our state. If you're an artist, arts organization, or just passionate about Mississippi's creative community, learn more, apply for grants, or get involved at arts.ms.gov. You can also follow the Mississippi Arts Commission on Instagram and Facebook for updates. Keep an eye out for the announcement of this year's Governor's Arts Awards honorees and make plans to attend the ceremony in Jackson. Plus, the National Folk Festival is coming to downtown Jackson, an incredible, free celebration of American music and culture. Don't miss it. For Bottled Up, I'm Andrew Allen. Thanks for listening. And until next time, remember to always support our local businesses, restaurants, events, and attractions. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Bottled Up Podcast. Want us to deliver this show to your email inbox as they drop? Want to tell us about how you like the show? Or do you want to tell us about a Gulf Coast business or restaurant that you'd like for us to spotlight in any upcoming episodes? Email Morgan Wheeler at mwheeler, MWHEELER at abevinc.com. That's ABEVINC.com. Want to know more about Allen Beverages and how we work with our clients, partners, and vendors? Check out allenbeverages.com. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Gwynn and Deep Fried Studios.